movers, I think y'all are right. That thing sounds pretty rough. Holy crap, I think that's worse than last time. Well, I had to get back in a pickup here where we could communicate. You pick this camera up, it's just like a light switch. It's like you turn the wind on, 40-mile-an-hour gust of wind just immediately. And you went blow me over. So we got to put bearings in this electric motor. We've already worked on this one. We've already put bearings in this motor. I published that video 4 years and 2 weeks ago. 4 years and 15 days. I looked up there, I published it. If you want to go watch it, there'll be a link in the description and one of those cards. I don't remember which side it always pops up on. But you can watch the first time we did this. It was one of the first oil field videos that I did, actually. And anyway, this is a great example to me of why things only have to be good enough. Perfection doesn't matter. They just have to be good enough. You know, I'm going to take a hammer and knock this motor apart, knock the bearings off of it, bash them back on with a hammer. We're not going to spend the time to go to town and use a press or anything like that. And a lot of times people get really wound up about things like that. You know, you're a horrible mechanic, you know, and you're not gonna hurt my feelings. I don't care. I'm not griping about that. But people get all wound up, you know, thinking everything needs to be done perfectly. And this is a great example of why that is not always true. You know, I put this together on the last video and had a bunch of comments. People were like, that's never gonna last, that's never gonna work. And the truth is it worked perfectly for 4 years. And we had a lightning storm out here. We've had absolute hell with lightning out here. I don't know why it's been so bad this year, because we've had a bunch of rain, a bunch of storms. But we took a lightning strike down about a quarter of a mile down this line this way and just blew stuff all to heck. Blew up several motors. In fact, on this end of the lease of the stuff that was running, this and one other motor was the only two that survived. And I don't understand how it happened, but both of these motors, it burned the bearings up in the motor. Like somehow or another, the voltage jumped through the bearing and arced through the bearing. And it's been about, this thing's ran about a week, and it sounded pretty rough when I turned it back on. You know, after we got the electricity back on, and it's gotten much worse. Anyway, as I said, I think this is a great example of why things just have to be good enough. Because if I'd have took this in and pressed it together, or if I'd bought a new $4,000 explosion-proof motor, it'd have got smoked and the bearings burned up and everything just like it did. Alright, let's knock this out. It is currently 9:43. Let's see how quickly, y'all see that? Let's see how quickly we can get this done. We're going to do a quick winding inspection here. I don't see anything that looks like a problem. A couple things I'm looking for is whether or not the rotor has been rubbing the stator. If it has, a lot of times it'll make a hot spot, especially if it's very bad, and it'll melt the insulation on the wires. And even if they hadn't burned up yet, they usually will the next time you get a little bit of transient voltage to a lightning storm. These look fine. It does look like it actually was touching here, but very, very minorly. So good. So far, so good. So this one is definitely the, well, that one's bad. I hadn't checked this one yet, I guess. But let's go ahead and debearing this side. I wonder, this inbuilt side. This inbuilt side actually feels okay. I would still like to change it. Thing's hot. You reckon these rags from China? Box of royal rags. A bag of rags. Tell you what, I may just leave this bearing because it does seem fine. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to haul this crap back home. Alright, let's go put it back together. Oh no, I ran out of impact wrench. I gotta leave just enough space here to be able to get a screwdriver to line up these bolts with this plate thing here at the back. Just like that. I really kind of did this wrong. I usually put the bearing in this end bell and put it on, and then slide the shaft into the bearing. You know the wind's blowing hard when it blows a full socket set over. That'll probably work. Tell you what, before we go any farther, let's run it and see what it sounds like. Much better. All right, here we go. Well, I was sitting here rattling. We just went and looked at another well, and I realized that my camera wasn't rolling. So it is now 10:14, including the time it took me to drive across this lease and talk about this other well and pick my tools up and everything else. So whatever time that was that we started, that's how long it took me. I'll show you this well here. So we were right, I'm trying to look through the camera, there's a well right there, that's where we were working. This one has done the same thing. This one was super quiet, sounded great, until we had the electrical storm, and somehow or another it arced through those bearings. I don't understand mechanically how, or electrically, or whatever the word is, how that high voltage in the stator can burn up the bearings because they're not connected. You know, high voltage in the rotor would make more sense. I guess maybe it induces a voltage or something. But somehow or another, when you have a transient voltage through here, if it doesn't burn the windings up, it will smoke the bearings. I've had that happen just a few times in my life, and this is the first time I've ever seen it happen. Two motors right next to each other. We burned the motor up on that well. I think I might have a shot from on my phone. I may show you on that. The stuff I've been working on. This thing blew up so hard I wanted to show it to you. It took me a second to find the front of the box. It must have hit the unit so hard that it bent it. Another thing that's cool is when it blew up, the shock wave must have been a lot faster than the smoke, because you can see how smoked that thing is, and there's not any on the cover. But look at the hinges, it just straightened the hinges out. So I was going to tear that other motor apart today. I had planned on doing two motors today, but one of the batteries to my impact wrench was dead, and so we're not going to do that. I'm going to take it back home and charge it, and I'll work on that tomorrow. So I'd like to take this bearing home. I'm going to, and tear it apart. I want to see what the races look like, because like I say, it was silent until we had that electrical storm, and then it sounded pretty much like it sounded when you heard it earlier. I'm going to finish checking my leases, and I got a rig working for me. I got a few things to do, and we'll look at that motor, look at that bearing here in a little bit. I got you clamped on the workbench here so you can have a real up close personal look. I got this bearing cut apart. You can see that it still had plenty of grease in it. You know, it's been ran 24/7 for 4 years. Somebody do the math, how many hours is that? And you know, they wouldn't, you know, having an open bearing with pumping more grease in it certainly wouldn't have helped anything. Well, this race looks much better than I expected. It's got a little bit, it's a little rough right there. This is fixing to be interesting. Look at the one side of this. You can tell how all four of these balls were sitting whenever they, that's amazing. I guess whenever the lightning struck, it arced from this to that or something. I don't know. You know, there's just a little bit of roughness in this race, but that might even be, I mean, the other one that we didn't replace might be that bad. It's all right here. It's very obvious that's like a looks like I struck a welding arc on it. It's not a like a You know, a lot of times if you get a pit in a bearing, it'll start to sort of flake the material away, and that's not what that looks like to me. Not that I would consider myself an expert, but it's still a little bit mind-blowing to me how you have a lightning strike somewhere and the lightning travels through the wires, the voltage through the wires and into the stator, and somehow the stator induces a voltage into the rotor, which jumps through the bearings back to the case. It just looks to me like it would just short from the stator directly to the case, which I guess generally is what normally happens out there. But you know, we put these bearings in 4 years ago. It's definitely a hack job going out there and driving these things on with a hammer. But it's one of those things that, you know, if I'd have taken the time to do it by the book as perfect as you could, there still would not have been any additional life added to that bearing. You know, it was blown up by Mother Nature, not me hammering it on. That's also a reason why I like to run those sealed bearings. If you run open bearings or shielded bearings, they don't hold grease as well, and if you grease them probably once a month, they would last longer. Or you can just throw a sealed bearing in it and never worry about it again, and you know, that had run 4 years, it probably will run 3 or 4 more. You know, if you get 8 years out of something, you know, in 8 years you're going to forget to grease at one point, and you're going to have a failure anyway if you run an open bearing, a greasable bearing. You know, the other thing too is that motor, to me, is kind of like your great grandma's car that she's wrecked a half a dozen times and ran out of oil twice. You know, she calls you and says it smells funny, and you pull up there and it's boiling over, steam coming out of it. You know, you just pour water in it and throw a little incense on it and hope for the best. You know, that motor has not got a high likelihood of living long. Of course, I mean, I would have thought probably it already blown up if it's going to, but it has had a rough life, and any more life that I get out of it is a bonus. It has already paid its dues, to say the least. But anyway, I got to get the Jeep back in here. It's out there. When we drove it the other day, you know, I just jumped in and drove it. I needed to get it off the lift to check the oil in the transmission. You got to do it from the top, and I couldn't really reach it when it was on the lift. Anyway, I drove it around and then checked the oil in it, in the transmission, and it was full of mud and water, or some kind of rusty looking stuff. It's pretty rough looking, and it's got some kind of noise, and I'm thinking it's probably the transmission, not the rear end, but I'm not quite positive about that. Anyway, I think I'm going to get my shop cleaned up over there, get that mess cleaned up, to get the Jeep back in here, and I'm going to pull the transmission out of it. But that is it. Appreciate you watching. I got a lot more kind of oil fieldy stuff coming up. Hopefully we can actually start getting some good videos and get some good stuff. El Nino is over, finally. That's what they're saying. Appreciate you watching. Like, share, subscribe, and all the good things, and I will catch you on the next one.